A distant war raged across the void, fought in shadows and silence, until the day humanity arrived. The battlefield was a graveyard of shattered warships, drifting through the blackness like tombstones in space. Alien fleets clashed in an endless struggle, their weapons carving fire into the abyss. None had ever seen a force like humanity's before. None had ever truly understood what it meant when the human fleet entered the battlefield. Commander Elias Voss stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, his gaze locked on the distant carnage unfolding before him. The enemy's ships, sleek, insectoid constructs of the Zalvan and the hulking biomechanical leviathans of the Drexer Dominion, were tearing each other apart. For centuries, these two empires had waged war, their hatred older than human civilization itself. They never expected an interruption. They never expected humanity. "We're in position, Commander," Lieutenant Rains said, her voice steady despite the tension gripping the bridge. "Fleet reports ready across all battle groups." Elias exhaled slowly. The weight of history pressed down on his shoulders. Humanity had remained hidden, watching from the shadows, biding its time. But the war had reached their borders. Refugee colonies had burned. Silent distress calls had echoed across the stars. And humanity had made its choice. "No more running," Elias muttered. His fingers tightened around the armrest of his command chair. "Activate battle formation. Bring us into the fray." Engines roared to life. Massive warships, built from steel and fire, surged forward. The Endeavour led the charge, flanked by the Ironclad and Valkyrie, while squadrons of fighters fanned out like a storm of steel. The human fleet moved with a precision the warring factions had never seen before. They weren't just another empire, hungry for conquest. They weren't here for territory or plunder. They were here with a single, unwavering message: humanity would not be ignored. As the fleet advanced, the battle shifted. The Zalvan and Drexer ships hesitated, their weapons faltering for the briefest moment. Scanners flickered as alien commanders scrambled to understand who these newcomers were. Then a message was sent. A single broadcast carried across the battlefield. "This is Commander Elias Voss of the United Human Federation." His voice rang out, calm and resolute. "Your war has spilled into our space. Your destruction has reached our worlds. That ends today." A tense silence followed. Then the Zalvan fleet reacted first. Whether it was arrogance or desperation, their ships pivoted, locking onto the human vessels. Energy lances charged, weapons primed. They would not yield. They would not negotiate. Elias expected nothing less. Shields up. Engage at will. The human fleet unleashed hell. Plasma cannons roared, missiles streaked across the void, and railguns punched through armor like paper. Fighters weaved through the chaos, outmaneuvering enemies that had never encountered pilots who fought like humans did. With instinct, with fury, with the sheer will to survive. The Zalvan fired back, their beams slicing through the dark, but humanity had come prepared. Shields absorbed the impact, countermeasures scattered incoming fire, and then, ship by ship, the enemy began to break. They had underestimated the humans. They had mistaken silence for weakness. And then the Drexer moved. From the depths of the battlefield, their largest warship, the Bloodforged, shifted course. A monstrosity of living metal and organic horror, it dwarfed anything humanity had ever faced. Its weapons pulsed with energy strong enough to crack moons. It had watched the battle unfold, waiting, studying. And now it had chosen its prey. A deep, guttural transmission echoed across the human fleet, translated by the ship's systems. "You are new to this war," the Drexer warlord rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "You do not understand. You will be broken." Elias clenched his jaw. The battle was far from over. The true test had just begun, and humanity had no intention of backing down. A cold silence filled the bridge as the Drexer warlord's words faded. The crew of the Endeavour knew what was coming. The Bloodforged was not just a warship. It was a declaration of dominance, a symbol of everything the Drexer stood for. If it moved against humanity, it wasn't just another battle. It was a challenge. Elias Voss leaned forward in his chair, his mind racing through possible strategies. The Bloodforged was larger than any ship in the fleet, its armor thick enough to withstand entire barrages. Standard tactics wouldn't be enough. They needed to outthink the enemy, to prove that humanity wasn't just another species to be crushed under the Drexer's relentless advance. "Status on their weapons?" he asked. Lieutenant Rains' fingers danced over her console. "Energy readings are spiking. Their main cannon is charging." She hesitated for just a fraction of a second. If it fires, we won't be able to tank the hit, Commander. That was the reality of the situation. Humanity had made great strides in warfare, but they weren't invincible. The Drexer had fought for centuries, conquering world after world, and their technology reflected it. A direct blast from that ship could end the battle before it even began. Elias, a calm voice cut in through the tension. It was Admiral Kessler, patched through from the flagship Dauntless. We can't afford a prolonged engagement. The longer we wait, the more time they have to analyze our tactics. Elias knew she was right. The Drexer didn't fight recklessly. They studied, they adapted, and once they understood their enemy, they crushed them without hesitation. If they let that happen, humanity's first battle in this war would also be its last. He turned toward the tactical display. The Bloodforged loomed in the center, its weapon signatures growing stronger by the second. Around it, Drexer escorts moved into position, forming a protective wall between the massive warship and the human fleet. Any attempt to strike directly would be met with overwhelming resistance. Elias took a breath. We don't fight them on their terms, he decided. We hit them where they don't expect it. His mind worked quickly, pulling together fragments of old battle reports, simulations, anything that could give them an edge. The Drexer relied on brute force, but there was always a weakness. They saw humanity as newcomers, a lesser force trying to step into a war it didn't belong in. That arrogance would cost them. Lieutenant, send orders to all battle groups, he said. We need to split their focus. I want Task Force Omega moving in from their flank, drawing fire. Gamma Squadron will feint an attack on their secondary cruisers. And the Endeavor? He allowed himself the smallest smirk. We're going straight for the monster. Rain hesitated. Sir, if they focus fire on us. They won't, Elias cut in. Not if we make them believe the real threat is somewhere else. Signals were sent. Across the battlefield, human ships adjusted course. Fighters darted between debris, capital ships altered their trajectories, and the fleet shifted in a way that seemed chaotic. But it wasn't. It was a carefully orchestrated misdirection, a web of movement designed to confuse an enemy that believed itself superior. The Drexer took the bait. Their escort ships turned to meet the sudden flanking maneuver, their turrets lighting up with heavy fire. Fighters broke formation to intercept the incoming squadrons. The Bloodforged, slow but unstoppable, adjusted slightly, just enough to compensate for the unexpected attacks. That was all Elias needed. Now, he ordered. The Endeavor surged forward. Engines roared, pushing the warship straight into the heart of the chaos. Plasma bolts streaked past, shields flaring as they absorbed glancing hits. The crew remained focused, locked into their stations, every movement precise. The Bloodforged loomed ahead, its cannon now fully charged. A deep, pulsing glow radiated from its core, the energy building to unleash devastation across the human fleet. But Elias wasn't aiming for the cannon. Fire all forward torpedoes, he commanded. The Endeavor unleashed its payload. Missiles streaked through the void, not at the Bloodforged itself, but at the surrounding wreckage from the earlier battle. Shattered Zalvon and Drexer ships, their cores still unstable, detonated in a chain reaction. Explosions flared like miniature supernovas, engulfing the area in flames and debris. The Bloodforged shields held barely. But the distraction worked. For just a moment, the massive warship's cannon flickered. Its charging sequence interrupted as automated systems struggled to compensate for the sudden energy fluctuations. Elias didn't waste a second. All ships, focus fire on the exposed section. Bring it down before it recovers. Humanity had made its move. Now, it was time to see if they could survive the response. The void erupted in fire and chaos. Human warships unleashed everything they had, pouring railgun rounds, missile barrages, and concentrated energy blasts into the weakened section of the Bloodforged shields. The Drexer behemoth groaned under the assault, its thick armor blackened and cracked in places. But it wasn't breaking fast enough. Elias gritted his teeth. The Endeavor's cannons overheated from the continuous fire, but there was no room to stop. If the Drexer regained control of their main cannon, they could wipe out half the fleet in a single blast. The humans had landed a solid hit, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Commander, their systems are stabilizing, Rain warned, her voice edged with urgency. Their shield generators are rerouting power. Before she could finish, the Bloodforged retaliated. A shockwave burst from its hull, a kinetic pulse designed to shove back any smaller ships that got too close. The Endeavor lurched violently as alarms blared, warning of sudden energy surges. Nearby, two human corvettes were tossed like ragdolls, their hulls scraping against the debris field. One managed to recover, thrusters firing wildly. The other spun out of control, crashing into the remains of a Zalvan warship. "They're regrouping," Admiral Kessler's voice cut through the comms. "That thing isn't going down easily." Elias already knew that. The Bloodforged wasn't just a ship, it was a fortress. And the Drexer never fought without an answer to every move their enemies made. "Commander," another voice chimed in, Lieutenant Jarrow from the Recon Squadron. "We've picked up movement on the far side of the battlefield. Drexer reinforcements." Elias inhaled sharply. Of course, it wouldn't just be one warship. "How long until they arrive?" he asked. Jarrow hesitated. "If they push to maximum burn, 5 minutes." 5 minutes. It might as well have been 5 seconds. They had already committed everything to this battle. If more Drexer warships arrived, humanity's first real stand would turn into a slaughter. They had one chance, to take down the Bloodforged before those reinforcements arrived. Elias scanned the battlefield, searching for options. Fighters weaved through laser fire, dodging and striking in desperate maneuvers. Frigates and destroyers flanked the enemy, their captains pushing their ships past their limits to gain an advantage. The Drexer fought back with relentless precision, their turret fire cutting through weaker vessels like razors. And then Elias saw it, a pattern in their movements. The Bloodforged had reinforced armor plating along its primary hull, but in doing so, it left the power conduits along the aft sections slightly exposed. Not much, but enough. A weakness. "Lieutenant Rain," Elias said, his voice steady despite the chaos, "get me a direct line to the Dauntless and all remaining bombers." A beat later, Admiral Kessler's face flickered onto the comm screen. "You have a plan?" "We're targeting the Bloodforged's aft section," Elias explained. "We overload their power relays, force a chain reaction through their systems. It might not destroy them, but it'll cripple them long enough to get the hell out of here before reinforcements arrive." Kessler's eyes narrowed, considering. "Risky. Everything about this mission is risky," Elias said. "But if we don't act now, we lose everything." A moment passed before Kessler nodded. "All right, you've got your strike team. Make it count." Orders were sent, and bombers peeled away from the dogfights, setting course for the target zone. The Dauntless adjusted its angle, priming its heavy cannons for the strike. The Drexer, ever watchful, noticed the shift in strategy and adapted immediately. More enemy ships moved to intercept, their weapons locking onto the incoming bombers. They saw the plan. They were going to stop it. "Cover them," Elias barked. "All units, focus fire on the interceptors." Human fighters surged forward, weaving between enemy fire. Explosions rocked the battlefield as both sides suffered losses. A Drexer battleship shifted, trying to block the Dauntless line of sight. Torpedoes launched from human warships, slamming into the battleship's side, forcing it off course just enough for the Dauntless to get a clear shot. And then the moment came. The first wave of bombers broke through, releasing payloads directly onto the Bloodforged's exposed conduits. The impact sent shudders through the massive ship, energy flaring erratically across its hull. The second wave hit moments later, and something deep within the Drexer warship finally gave way. A ripple of internal explosions cascaded through its structure, tearing through power lines and systems. The great behemoth staggered, its main cannon flickering as its energy drained away. It wasn't destroyed, but it was wounded. And then, on the scanners, a new alert flashed. The Drexer reinforcements had arrived. Elias didn't need to hear the reports to know what that meant. More warships emerging from slip space, more enemy fighters flooding the battlefield. The mission had succeeded, but the battle had just taken another turn. "Commander," Rain said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're hailing us." The Drexer, infamous for their refusal to negotiate, were sending a transmission. Elias exhaled, his pulse steady despite the storm raging around him. "Put it through," he said. The screen flickered. And then, for the first time, the warlord of the Bloodforged spoke directly to him. "This is not over, human." The image on the screen was distorted, static flickering through the transmission. Even damaged, the Drexer warlord's presence was imposing. His armor gleamed under the dim red lighting of his command bridge, and his reptilian eyes locked onto Elias with something between fury and cold amusement. "You think you've won something here," the warlord said, his voice deep guttural. "You are mistaken." Elias kept his expression unreadable. He could hear the tension in the silence across the bridge. Every crew member was watching, waiting, their breaths held as the warlord's words echoed through the comms. "We're still standing," Elias replied. "And your ship isn't." The warlord let out a slow, rumbling exhale. Not quite a laugh, but something close. "We have fought empires that burned stars to ashes," he said. "You are nothing compared to them. And yet you challenge us." "Seems like we left a mark," Elias said, keeping his voice steady. The warlord's eyes narrowed. "Yes," he admitted. "And now you will burn for it." The transmission cut off. "Multiple warships closing in fast," Rain called out, her hands flying across the controls. "They're forming a spearhead, aiming straight for the Endeavor." Elias snapped back into action. "Evasive maneuvers. Pull back toward the fleet. Keep the Dauntless in formation." Engines roared as the Endeavor banked hard, pushing past the drifting wreckage that littered the battlefield. The reinforcements had arrived in full force, sleek, black Drexer battleships cutting through space like silent predators. They moved with terrifying precision, their weapons locking on before the first shots even fired. And then the void exploded. A wall of energy beams and missile fire rained down on the human fleet. Shields flared, some barely holding, others failing under the sheer force of the assault. The Dauntless fired back, its massive cannons cutting through the dark, landing direct hits on 2 incoming cruisers. One enemy ship spiraled out of control, engines bursting into flames. The other took the impact and kept moving undeterred. The Endeavor weaved through the chaos, thrusters straining as Elias pushed the ship to its limits. Fighters darted around them, locked in deadly dogfights. Every second counted. If they stayed in this battle too long, the reinforcements would overwhelm them. "Status on the Bloodforged?" Elias asked. Rain checked the readings. "It's still crippled, but their repair systems are kicking in. If we don't get out of here soon, they'll be back online." That wasn't an option. "Admiral Kessler," Elias called over the fleet channel. "We need an exit route. Now." Kessler's voice came through, sharp and urgent. "Working on it. We have a clear vector, but the Drexer are moving to cut us off." Elias cursed under his breath. It was a trap, and they all knew it. The Drexer wanted them to run, because they had already calculated where they would go. If humanity tried to retreat in a straight line, they'd be shredded before they ever reached the jump point. Elias clenched his jaw. They needed to do something unexpected. His mind raced through possibilities. The battlefield was littered with debris from the previous fights. Large sections of shattered warships floated in the void, creating a chaotic, unpredictable terrain. It was dangerous, but it was also their best chance. "Change course," Elias ordered. "We're going through the wreckage." Rain's head snapped up. "Sir, that's exactly what they won't expect," he finished. "We'll lose them in the debris field. The Drexer fight with precision, but they don't handle chaos well." For a moment, the bridge was silent. Then Kessler's voice came through. "You're insane, Elias." "Probably," he admitted. "But it'll work." The fleet shifted course. Human ships dove into the wreckage, weaving between massive, broken hulls. Some of the debris was still active, sparking with remnants of old energy cores. It was like flying through a minefield, but it gave them cover. The Drexer hesitated. Their warships slowed, adjusting formation, wary of the unpredictable terrain. That was their mistake. "Now!" Elias shouted. The human fleet used the opening. Engines roared as they pushed through the last stretch, breaking free of the debris field just as the jump coordinates locked in. But just before the command to jump was given, something new appeared on the scanners. A new energy signature, something massive. Elias's stomach tightened. "What the hell is that?" Rain's face paled as she read the readings. "It's another ship, but the energy levels are off the charts." On the main screen, beyond the Drexer fleet, something was emerging from slip space. A ship unlike any they had seen before. Not Drexer. Not Zalvon. Something else entirely. And then, for the first time since the battle had begun, the Drexer warships hesitated. The Bloodforged, crippled but still alive, sent out a single transmission. Not to the humans, but to the approaching vessel. Elias didn't know what they had just stumbled into. But whatever it was, the battle wasn't over. It was only beginning. The silence that followed was worse than the battle. The human fleet had fought through chaos, survived overwhelming odds, and crippled the Bloodforged. But now something new had entered the battlefield. Something even the Drexer hesitated to face. Elias's pulse hammered as he watched the massive vessel fully emerge from slip space. It was unlike anything in the database. Its hull was smooth, almost organic in design, shimmering with an eerie, shifting glow that seemed to absorb the surrounding light. It wasn't just large, it was colossal, dwarfing even the Bloodforged, a monolith of unknown technology and terrifying purpose. Rain's fingers flew over the scanners, but the readings made no sense. Commander, I can't get a proper lock on it. The energy readings are fluctuating. It's like, she hesitated, staring at the data. It's like it's rewriting itself. That sent a chill through Elias. Ships didn't change in real time. Not like this. Then the Bloodforged sent another transmission. Not to the human fleet, but directly to the unknown ship. Short bursts of Drexer code flashed across the screen, and though it wasn't translated, Elias could tell exactly what it meant. A distress call. A request for reinforcement. Or worse, a surrender. Before Elias could even react, the unknown ship answered. A pulse of energy rippled through the battlefield, invisible yet undeniable. Every human and Drexer ship systems flickered, lights dimming, weapons momentarily shutting down. Not an attack. A message. And then the ship spoke. Not in words, not in any language that existed, but in raw thought. It wasn't transmitted through the comms. It was inside Elias's mind, inside everyone's mind. A voice that was neither human nor machine, neither cold nor warm. It simply was. This war is irrelevant. The words didn't echo, didn't linger in the air. They simply existed, imprinted directly onto the consciousness of every being present. Elias felt the weight of them, like something vast and ancient was pressing down on his very soul. He wasn't the only one who felt it. Around him, the crew of the Endeavor sat frozen, some gripping their heads, others staring blankly at the screens as if struggling to comprehend what had just happened. On the battlefield, the Drexer fleet wavered. Their warships, once relentless and unyielding, now drifted slightly uncertain. Even the Bloodforged, despite its damage, seemed smaller in the presence of this entity. Then the voice returned. You do not belong here. And with those words, the ship moved. It didn't fire weapons. It didn't launch an attack. It simply existed in a different place. One moment, it was on the outskirts of the battlefield, a distant silhouette against the void. The next, it was in the center of the wreckage, positioned between the human and Drexer fleets, as if space itself had folded to place it there. Elias's breath caught. Did it just? Before he could finish, the Bloodforged fired. A desperate, defiant shot. Its remaining rail cannons launched a barrage of molten projectiles at the unknown vessel. The attack never landed. The rounds reached the shimmering hull, then vanished. Not absorbed, not deflected. They simply ceased to exist, as if they had never been fired at all. And then, for the first time, the unknown ship responded. A low hum filled the battlefield, vibrating through every ship, every hull. The Drexer warships trembled, their formations faltering. Then, before anyone could react, the Bloodforged, the mighty warship that had terrorized the human fleet, began to disintegrate. Not explode. Not shatter. Disintegrate. Its structure unraveled like sand slipping through fingers, its metallic form dissolving into tiny motes of light that were pulled into the unknown ship's hull. Within seconds, the Bloodforged was gone. No wreckage. No debris. As if it had never existed. The Drexer fleet broke. Their unshakable discipline fractured, captains choosing retreat over annihilation. One by one, their warships turned, engines roaring as they activated emergency slip-space jumps. Within moments, half the enemy fleet had disappeared. The rest weren't far behind. Elias sat frozen, gripping the edge of his console so hard his knuckles turned white. The human fleet hadn't won. Not really. Something else had just ended the battle for them. And then, just as suddenly as it had arrived, the unknown ship turned. Not toward the fleeing Drexer. Not toward the human fleet. Toward Earth. Elias's heart slammed against his ribs. No, but the ship had already begun moving, slipping into the void with that same unnatural grace. No weapons fired. No threats given. And yet Elias knew in that moment that whatever it was, whoever it wasn't finished. The war wasn't over. It had only changed. Elias felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The battle was over, but the real threat had just begun. The unknown ship, the entity that had erased the Bloodforged as if it had never existed, was now heading toward Earth. Not attacking. Not broadcasting demands. Just moving. And that was somehow more terrifying than any open act of war. Track its trajectory, Elias ordered, his voice steadier than he felt. Rain's fingers flew across the controls. It's not using conventional propulsion, she said. It's folding space. I can't predict where it'll exit, but if it keeps this course, it'll reach Earth in hours, Elias finished. Kessler's voice came through the comms, sharp with urgency. We're regrouping at the Sol defense perimeter. If that thing makes any hostile moves, we won't hesitate to open fire. Elias clenched his jaw. The human fleet had taken heavy losses. Even if they threw everything they had at it, what good would it do? The Bloodforged had been one of the most powerful Drexer warships ever built, and it had been erased like an afterthought. Would humanity be next? A sudden chime echoed through the bridge. Not an attack alert. Not an enemy transmission. A direct message. From the unknown ship. Elias hesitated, then nodded to Rain. She activated the link. No image. No sound. Just that same overwhelming presence, forcing its way into their minds. You do not understand. Elias steadied himself. Then make us understand. There was a pause, a sensation like something vast considering his words. Then images. Not words, not thoughts, but memories that weren't his. A war. Not between humans and the Drexer. Not between any species he recognized. A war so ancient that stars had died in its wake. Two forces. One of order. One of chaos. Not good and evil. Just different. And between them, something else. Something that shouldn't have existed. A force that had consumed everything it touched, rewriting reality, breaking the very fabric of existence. And then Elias saw it. Not the unknown ship, but what it had been created to fight. A darkness that moved without shape, without form, devouring entire civilizations in an instant. It wasn't an enemy that conquered. It was an enemy that unmade. Elias sucked in a breath. You think we're part of that. You carry its remnants. A cold realization settled in his gut. They weren't the threat. Humanity wasn't the enemy. But something inside them was. Kessler's voice cut through the comms, unaware of the silent conversation unfolding. The fleet is in position. If that thing makes a move, we fire. Elias had seconds to decide. If he told Kessler to stand down and he was wrong, Earth would be defenseless. But if he let them attack, if this entity wasn't hostile, then humanity might have just doomed itself. The unknown ship didn't wait for his answer. It moved again, faster than anything should have been able to, and in the blink of an eye, it was in Earth's orbit. The defense fleet opened fire. A storm of missiles and energy blasts streaked through space, slamming into the ship's shimmering hull. And disappearing. Not absorbed. Not deflected. Simply gone. Elias's heart pounded. This was it. If it retaliated, Earth wouldn't stand a chance. But it didn't fire. It didn't even move. Instead, something rippled across its surface. A release. And then, from the core of the ship, something fell. Not a weapon. Not an attack. A single glowing fragment. It streaked through Earth's atmosphere, descending like a comet, landing somewhere in the mountains. And then, just as silently as it had arrived, the ship vanished. No explosion. No retreat. Just gone. The war was over. But the real mystery had just begun. Elias exhaled. We need to find whatever it left behind. Because whatever was buried in that fragment, whatever the entity had come searching for, humanity had been carrying it all along. Elias crouched near the glowing fragment, feeling the energy radiating from it. It pulsed like a living thing, shifting colors in slow, rhythmic waves. It wasn't just light, it was information, encoded in a way beyond human understanding. Rain and the science team worked quickly, setting up equipment to analyze it. But Elias knew this wasn't something that could be measured with ordinary tools. Kessler's voice came through the comms. Command wants answers. What are we looking at? Elias hesitated, watching as Rain touched the fragment. A pulse of energy rippled outward, harmless but undeniable, like a whisper in the air. Rain's eyes widened. It's not a weapon, she said. It's a message. Elias turned toward her. From who? She glanced at him, then back at the shifting fragment. Not them. Not the ones who left it. A cold realization settled over him. The unknown ship, the entity that had erased the Bloodforged, hadn't come as a conqueror. It had come searching for this fragment of knowledge, buried deep within humanity's past. But why? Then the whisper came. Not in sound, not in language, but in thought. We were here before. Elias shivered. The message wasn't from the entity. It was from something older, something long buried. The fragment wasn't just data. It was a piece of something lost. A warning. Or a reminder. Kessler's voice cut through the comms again. Elias, what's going on? He exhaled slowly. I don't think we're the first ones to walk this path, he said. And I don't think we're alone. The fragment pulsed one last time, then faded, its energy dissolving into the air. Whatever knowledge it held was now inside them, inside their history. The unknown ship had left without a fight because it hadn't needed to. Humanity had already been touched by something far greater than they understood. Rain stared at the empty space where the fragment had been. What do we do now? Elias looked up at the night sky. The Drexer were retreating, the war was over, but something much bigger had just begun. The universe had changed, and humanity stood on the edge of something new. He turned back to his crew. We get ready, because whatever had left that message, whatever had once walked this path, might one day return.